Karen's mind raced as she faced Officer Rodriguez, her usual confidence crumbling like a sandcastle at high tide. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. Yes, but I didn't know. I mean, how was I supposed to know she lived there? The house has been empty for months. And she looked. Karen gestured helplessly across the street. She looked like what exactly? Officer Rodriguez's question hung in the air like a challenge. Across the street, more neighbors had emerged from their houses, drawn by the commotion. Karen could see them whispering, pointing. Her reputation as the neighborhood's protector was transforming into something else entirely. The service member, Lieutenant Sarah Chen, as Karen learned from the conversation drifting across the street, was explaining to Officer Martinez how she'd returned to find teenagers had tagged her garage with bright purple graffiti. She'd stop at the hardware store to buy primer and paint, still wearing her work uniform, because she was too tired to change after the long drive from Norfolk. "Ma'am," Officer Rodriguez continued, "military families deal with enough stress during deployments. False reports like this." False report. Karen's voice pitched higher. "I saw someone vandalizing property. I was protecting the neighborhood by calling the police on a woman cleaning her own house." The crowd across the street was growing. Karen spotted Mrs. Chen from 2 houses down, no relation to the lieutenant. Bob Martinez from the corner house, and worst of all, Janet Stevens, her biggest rival for HOA influence. Janet was already making her way over, her expression a mixture of concern and barely concealed glee. "Karen, honey, what's happening? Did you really call the police on that poor Navy girl?" "I didn't know she was Navy." Karen snapped, then immediately regretted the defensive tone. Her old presidents didn't snap. They maintained dignified composure at all times. Officer Rodriguez closed his notepad. "We'll be filing a report about this incident. The lieutenant has every right to know who made the call." Karen's stomach dropped. "You're going to tell her it was me?" "Public record, ma'am." As the officers returned to their cars, Karen found herself surrounded by neighbors she'd led for years, their expressions ranging from disappointment to outright hostility. 8 months at sea, Bob Martinez said, shaking his head, "Can you imagine coming home to this?" "I made an honest mistake," Karen protested, but the words sounded hollow even to her own ears. Janet stepped closer, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Maybe it's time for new HOA leadership, someone with better judgment." The crowd murmured agreement, and Karen felt her carefully constructed world beginning to tilt on its axis. She'd spent 6 years building her authority, her influence, her perfect little kingdom, and it was crumbling because of one phone call. Lieutenant Chen was now talking with several neighbors who were apologizing profusely and offering to help with yard work, groceries, anything she needed. Karen watched from her porch, isolated and suddenly uncertain about everything she thought she knew about protecting her community. Her phone buzzed with the first of what would be dozens of text messages from neighbors who'd already heard about the incident. The HOA WhatsApp group was exploding with messages, and none of them were flattering. Karen retreated into her house, but she could still hear the voices outside, could still see through her window as Lieutenant Chen accepted offers of casseroles and welcome home flowers from the very neighbors who'd never once questioned Karen's authority before today. By evening, Karen's doorbell had rung 17 times. She'd stopped answering after the third angry neighbor, but the messages kept coming, slipped under her door, left in her mailbox, sent through every digital channel the neighborhood used to communicate. The emergency HOA meeting Janet Stevens had called was scheduled for tomorrow night, and Karen knew exactly what it was about. 6 years of leadership, of maintaining property values and enforcing standards, reduced to one catastrophic error in judgment. She paced her living room, rehearsing explanations that sounded increasingly desperate with each repetition. Through her window, she could see Lieutenant Chen's house, lights on, a small gathering of neighbors on the front porch, the sound of laughter carrying across the street. Karen's phone rang. Her sister Michelle, calling from Phoenix. "I just saw the Ring doorbell footage on Nextdoor," Michelle said without preamble. "Karen, what were you thinking?" "Ring doorbell footage?" Karen's voice cracked. The Hendersons captured the whole thing. You on your porch with your coffee, the police cars, everything. It's already being shared 43 times. Karen sank into her leather armchair, the same chair where she'd planned countless HOA initiatives, where she'd felt powerful and important. Now it felt like a throne in a kingdom that no longer wanted her as queen. I have to fix this, she whispered. How? You called the cops on a veteran, Karen. On camera. During an election year when everyone's talking about supporting our troops. After hanging up, Karen made a decision that surprised even herself. She grabbed a bottle of wine from her kitchen, a good bottle, not the cheap stuff she served at HOA meetings, and walked across the street. Lieutenant Chen answered the door, still in her military fatigues, looking exhausted but alert. Behind her, Karen could see several neighbors in the living room, and the conversation stopped when they saw who was at the door. I'm Karen Whitfield, she said, her voice smaller than she'd intended. I live across the street. I'm the one who... I know who you are. They stared at each other for a long moment. Karen had expected anger, hostility, maybe even a door slammed in her face. Instead, she saw something that looked almost like pity in the lieutenant's eyes. I brought wine. And an apology, a real one. Lieutenant Chen stepped aside, and Karen entered a house she'd watched over for months without ever knowing who lived there. The neighbors in the living room, her former supporters, watched her with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed contempt. I made a terrible mistake, Karen began, and for the first time in years, she spoke without calculation, without considering her image or her position. I saw what I expected to see instead of what was actually happening. I'm sorry. The room remained silent for several seconds that felt like hours. Why? Lieutenant Chen asked simply. Karen looked around the room, at Bob Martinez, at Mrs. Chen, at faces she'd led and lectured and controlled for years. Because I forgot that protecting a community means protecting the people in it, not just the property values. Janet Stevens cleared her throat from the corner. The HOA meeting is still happening tomorrow night. Karen nodded, understanding the subtext. Her reign as HOA president was over, ended not by scandal or corruption, but by a fundamental failure to see her neighbors as human beings rather than potential threats to her perfect community. But as she looked at Lieutenant Chen, tired, gracious, stronger than Karen had ever been, she realized that maybe losing power wasn't the worst thing that could happen to her. Maybe it was exactly what she needed. The lieutenant accepted the wine, and Karen left quietly, walking across the street to her house, where the light seemed dimmer somehow, where the silence felt less like peace and more like the echo of bridges she'd burned. Tomorrow's meeting would seal her fate, but tonight, for the first time in months, Karen Whitfield fell asleep without checking the neighborhood security cameras or planning her next HOA initiative. She dreamed of ocean waves and coming home to places that didn't feel quite like home anymore. Karen Whitfield stood at her pristine bay window, her manicured fingers gripping her phone so tightly her knuckles had gone white. The sight across the street made her blood pressure spike to dangerous levels. A weathered woman in military fatigues was spray painting something on the garage door of 1247 Maple Ridge Drive. This is it, Karen muttered, speed dialing 911. Finally caught one of these delinquents red-handed. The dispatcher's voice crackled through. 911. What's your emergency? I'm reporting vandalism in progress at Willowbrook Estates. There's a homeless woman defacing private property. She looks unstable, possibly dangerous. Karen had been HOA president for 6 years, and her kingdom of perfectly manicured lawns and regulation beige mailboxes had never seen such blatant disregard for community standards. The house across the street had been empty for 8 months, ever since that military family moved away, and now squatters were moving in. Officers are en route, ma'am. Karen ended the call with satisfaction, already composing the emergency HOA newsletter in her head. Vigilant leadership protects our property values. She'd make sure every resident knew how quickly she'd handled this crisis. 20 minutes later, 2 patrol cars pulled up just as Karen positioned herself on her front porch with a steaming cup of coffee, the perfect vantage point to witness justice being served. Officer Martinez approached the woman, who had finished her spray painting and was now sitting on the front steps, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. "Ma'am, we received a report of vandalism. Can you tell me what you're doing here?" The woman looked up, revealing a face marked by sun and salt air, with eyes that had seen too much. "I'm painting over the graffiti some kids left while we were deployed. This is my house." Karen's coffee mug slipped from her fingers, shattering on the porch steps. Her mouth fell open as she watched the woman pull out military ID, house keys, and what looked like deployment papers. "Welcome home, ma'am," Officer Martinez said, his tone shifting to one of respect. "Thank you for your service. How long were you away?" 8 months. USS Harry S. Truman. Just got back yesterday. The woman's voice carried the weight of months at sea, of missing birthdays and holidays, and ordinary Tuesday evenings. Karen felt the blood drain from her face as the reality crashed over her like a rogue wave. She'd called the police on a returning service member, on her own neighbor. The woman she'd dismissed as a homeless vagrant was Navy. But it was too late to take it back. Officer Rodriguez had already noticed Karen hovering on her porch and was walking over, his expression unreadable. "Were you the one who called this in, ma'am?"